Family Guy's been going strong since 1999, and throughout that time, plenty of characters have come and gone, but one of the most iconic characters outside of the Griffin family is good old Glenn Quagmire. Local pervert, comical sex offender, dog hater, and pilot, Quagmire is a character many people love and despise. And one thing is for sure, Quagmire has had a lot of strange relationships, many of which go well past our usual healthy to toxic criteria. I'm Keefe Nossi with Wicked Binge, and this is Glenn Quagmire Relationships, healthy to toxic to disturbing. First off, we'll be discussing different types of relationships, not simply the romantic or intimate ones. Secondly, as the title suggests, Glenn has very few healthy relationships, and toxic is not really a way we describe most of his relationships on this list. So, we'll be skipping the gray area altogether. So in a way, toxic is kind of Quagmire's average, where the furthest end of our spectrum will be reserved for his relationships that are downright dark, disgusting, or illegal. So just a heads up, in case anyone is uncomfortable with the discussion of those things. There aren't very many, but we're starting out by talking about our best relationships. These are the healthy. Taking our gold medal of health is Quagmire and Brenda. Brenda is Quagmire's younger sister who's appeared in a couple episodes. Initially in the season 8 episode, Jerome is the New Black. In this episode, she comes to stay at Glenn's house because she's being beaten by her fiancé Jeff. Quagmire clearly cares for his younger sister and will do just about anything for her, such as in the entirety of Season 10's Screams of Silence, the story of Brenda Q. In this episode, which is Brenda's most major appearance, we see the full extent of Jeff's abuse. Quagmire tries his hardest to solve this problem in a peaceful way, trying to convince Brenda to leave him. This doesn't work, so Quagmire jumps to murdering Jeff to save his sister. It's no surprise they rank here, although it may be odd to start out our healthy section with a relationship that resulted in murder, but it's Family Guy, and there aren't many people you'd murder another man for, so they definitely have to take gold. Earning our silver medal of health is the relationship between Quagmire and Cheryl Tiegs. Cheryl Tiegs makes up one of Quagmire's first relationships and his first celebrity crush. As early as Season 3's Mission Impossible, we can see this because Glenn has a poster of Tiegs in his home. In Season 4's The Perfect Castaway, Glenn even mentions that if he were blind, every woman who he slept with would be Tiegs.
Yeah, and every woman I did would be Cheryl Tiegs.
The Season 8 episode, Jerome is the New Black, reveals the full extent of their relationship because they were in a happy, serious relationship when Glenn was young. The two broke up because of that damn James Woods, which apparently led to the perverted man that Glenn had become, due to feeling emptiness in his soul. This is used against him later by Brian, who starts dating Cheryl Tiegs just to mess with him. This is no doubt one of his healthiest relationships, and it's sad that this relationship failing is what led Glenn to become the man that he is. Our bronze medal of health goes to Quagmire and Ida. Ida's first appearance in the Season 8 episode, Quagmire's Dad, is where she comes to Quahog to be honored for her military service. This is also when she gets her sex changed to become a her and fully embraces her true self. Quagmire is initially grossed out and against this, but after a while he manages to accept her and love her once more. Ida does embarrass Quagmire at times, talking about her operation or when she was sleeping with Brian, but she tries her hardest to be by Glenn's side, and he tries his best as well. Later episodes such as Season 12's Quagmire's Quagmire show that she will go to the ends of the earth to find her son, and Season 16's The Unkindest Cut ends with Ida giving Glenn her old equipment after Glenn gets his bitten off by a shark. Next up on our list is the relationship between Quagmire and the guys. Quagmire has been friends with Peter and Cleveland for a long time and became quick friends with Joe since his first appearance. Ever since then, this group has done many things. Even after Cleveland left the group for his own show, they care about each other, such as in Season 13's episode #JLo, where they stop Joe from jumping off of Niagara Falls because they care about him that much. Sure, they're great friends. They drink together all the time and have been since Season 1. Some episodes, such as Season 10's Forget Me Not, show that they would still be friends with amnesia, showing that they really are good friends. But there are also plenty of episodes where the exact opposite is also true. They fight a lot, which is kind of the reason they don't grab a medal here. Episodes like Season 12's Brian's Bad Dad has Peter and Quagmire shooting each other. Season 16's Fox in the Men House has Peter abandon them because he found somebody cooler. And the Season 15 episode Passenger Fatty 7 is all about Quagmire's friends thinking less of Quagmire because of the autopilot feature. But while they fight, they always stick together in the end, meaning they definitely deserve to be in the healthy section at least. Next up on our list is Quagmire and Anna Lee. In the Season 8 episode Quagmire's Baby, we're introduced to Anna Lee, the titular baby. She was left on Quagmire's doorstep during a garage sale he had by one of Glenn's one-night stands. He tries his best to be a good dad to the young girl, but it shows to not be a very easy situation for him, especially since she continually interrupts any of his romps. Now, he initially gives her up to the foster care system because of the aforementioned interruptions, but he regrets this decision. He even tries to get her back, but realizes she's happy with her new family, so he doesn't get in the way of that happiness. Up next on our list is Quagmire and Sujin. Sujin appears in the Season 14 episode Candy Quahog Marshmallow. It turns out that she and Quagmire had dated long ago when he was in Korea as part of a romantic soap opera. The two fell in love while working on the show, and they seemed to be quite loving, especially compared to some of Quagmire's other relationships, as he isn't just using her for relief. He was even willing to throw away his old life to live with her and her cats, showing he really cared for her. Obviously, this doesn't work out because Glenn finds out that her entire family would be living in close quarters to them, and he doesn't want to deal with that. But all in all, this is one of his best relationships overall, hence the placement. Rounding out the healthy section of our list, we've got Quagmire and Courtney. This one is going to sound pretty bad on paper, but we have to remember this is Family Guy logic. Courtney's from the Season 17 episode No Giggity, No Doubt, where Glenn meets her at a high school prom. Now, Glenn makes sure to ask her how old she is, and she confirms she's 18. But before anything happens, Glenn finds out that they're related, and after this point, he switches to trying to be a good father. This starts with him offering for her to live with him at his house, and changes quite a lot since he takes the dad thing very seriously. Now, we get into the meat and potatoes of this list. These are the toxic relationships. Starting off the toxic section of our list is the relationship between Quagmire and Lois. This has been explored in a multitude of episodes, most recently in Season 20's The Lois Quagmire. Quagmire has been heavily interested in Lois for a long time, despite her and Peter having been married for quite a long time. Glenn is shown to be attracted to her, spying on her at times and hitting on her at others. Now, he tells Brian in one episode that he's only really attracted to her body, to show that he's better than him because he's honest. But despite this, on multiple occasions, Lois and Quagmire get together in one way or another. The Season 8 episode Big Man on Hippocampus has the two get together when Peter has amnesia, and he's shown to be quite good for her. In another episode that takes place in an alternate timeline, Season 5's finale Meet the Quagmires shows that if Peter and Lois hadn't gotten together, she would have married Quagmire. The next relationship on our list is between Quagmire and Carrie. This comes from the Season 20 episode Must Love Dogs. Quagmire meets Carrie when she and her niece come to his house while trick-or-treating. This leads to Quagmire and Carrie hitting it off, and they do seem to care about each other until Glenn learns that she loves dogs. As we know, Glenn doesn't particularly like dogs, so he ends up repeatedly lying to her to try and get with her.
For a dog? And what's your return policy, is it?
This leads to him proposing to her through Brian, and having to deal with her intense amount of dogs and the problems that arise from that. The next relationship on our list is between Quagmire and Loretta. The entirety of this relationship is explored in Season 4's The Cleveland-Loretta Quagmire, where Loretta, Cleveland's wife, sleeps with Glenn. It's said that this happens because Cleveland's generally emotionless personality doesn't excite Loretta anymore, so she instead gets with Glenn. This obviously doesn't last long, as many of Glenn's relationships fall apart similarly, but this relationship is predicated on the betrayal of a friendship, even though Glenn does feel bad about this, so we have a very hard time placing this relationship. Hopefully this fits the general vibe we're looking at. Up next, we've got Quagmire and Monica. A relationship from the Season 17 episode Island Adventure. Monica is a middle-aged woman that Glenn has quite a lot of trouble getting with. He keeps getting shot down by her, leading to him going to Lois for advice, which he uses. However, he very quickly disregards her to get with other women, which Lois gets angry about. This is a very short situation, but the fact that he just tosses her aside, while not a surprise, definitely ranks them here. Iconic for all the wrong reasons, the next relationship we need to talk about is Quagmire and Brian. Quagmire and Brian initially seemed to be quite good friends due to Brian being Peter's dog, but as of season 8 and our favorite episode to talk about, apparently, Jerome is the New Black, it's shown that Glenn hates Brian. Glenn hates Brian for 101 reasons, including, but not limited to, constantly hitting on Lois, driving a Prius, looking down on religious people, being untrustworthy, more.
I could forgive all of that, all of it, if you weren't such a bore.
While initially not despising Quagmire, this hatred became mutual, and episodes like Teagues for Two from season 9 showed that Brian is willing to date Cheryl Teagues just to mess with Quagmire. And the aforementioned season 8 episode, Quagmire's Dad, has Quagmire brutally assault and attack Brian for having relations with Ida. Even more recent episodes like season 20's Must Love Dogs explore this relationship in depth, with Quagmire using Brian to get into bed with a woman. Brian even forces the two to get married, much to Glenn's chagrin. We've only scratched the surface on this relationship, but it definitely deserves this spot on our list. But now we get down to the worst possible relationships. These are the disturbing. Quite short, but the next on our list is Quagmire and Sandra from the season 15 episode, The Dating Game. When Glenn finds out about the hookup app Tinder, he becomes a crazed husk of a man unlike himself that Peter and the gang have to fix. After fixing Glenn, he becomes depressed about what had happened and feels like he's lost his spark until he meets Sandra. He immediately tricks Sandra into sleeping with him by telling her a phony story about his dead twin brother and taking her home. And like many of Quagmire's other conquests, being based on trickery, we can't in good conscience rank this situation any higher. One of Glenn's few marriages, Quagmire and Charmise, is next on our list. In the season 11 episode, The Giggity Wife, Quagmire accidentally marries Charmise, a lady of the night, while he's drunk. He doesn't particularly like her too much and tries to break up with her by pretending to be gay. This doesn't go too well because she tries to force him into having gay relations with Peter to prove it. The two eventually manage to split up, but not before a terrible breach of privacy, mostly on the part of Charmise, which is quite the change considering Glenn is usually the one who provides all of the terrible moments in the series. Another very short one we still need to talk about is Quagmire and Tracy Bellings. In a flashback during the season 12 episode of Fistful of Meg, it's revealed that Tracy is one of Quagmire's earliest relationships. Tracy was a bully who berated Glenn over his choice of Royal Crown Cola rather than Coke or Pepsi. This led to a mix of an assault and a sexual encounter that has stuck with Quagmire for most of his life. Apparently, this was the start of a long abusive relationship that was mostly public. The weirdly popular Quagmire and Meg relationship ranks next on our list. Now, Meg and Quagmire interact quite often, them being neighbors and Meg being the daughter of Glenn's best friend, but they don't really get together until the season 10 episode, Quagmire and Meg. This is a very weird relationship because despite how they are in every other episode, the Quagmire and Meg episode throws everything out the window. It's obvious throughout the episode that he is not only doing it exclusively to sleep with her, but it's also obvious that he's manipulating her throughout the episode to try and get in her pants. This is disturbing because not only did she just turn 18, but she's the daughter of, again, his best friend, and Quagmire's likely known her since she was a baby. Up next on our list, we've got Quagmire and Brooke Roberts. This is a relationship that only appears in season 4's Brian the Bachelor, where both Brian and Quagmire are on The Bachelorette to date Brooke Roberts. Quagmire is one of the first bachelors to get a rose during the show, showing that Brooke liked him at least a little bit. However, this falls into the disturbing category for good reason, because on their private date, which was being filmed because it's a reality show, he roofied her and tried to take advantage of her. He luckily doesn't get to that point because he catches the camera people, but he was just about to. In fact, he ends up in the final two because Brooke is unaware of what happened. He doesn't end up winning because he was trying to have a three-way between him, Brooke, and his own mother, which is a whole other can of worms. The next relationship is a short one, between Quagmire and Jennifer Love Hewitt. In the season 3 episode, Stuck Together, Torn Apart, it's revealed that Jennifer Love Hewitt is the niece of Mort and Muriel Goldman, who they set up on a date with Peter. At the end of the night, Lois breaks up the date between Peter and Jennifer, and she goes to get drinks. Jennifer is subsequently drugged by Quagmire via the use of a roofie colada, which she orders on most dates, apparently. Now, we don't see what happens past this, but it's pretty easy to figure out. Bagging the bronze medal of disturbing is the relationship between Quagmire and Kira. These two are shown together very briefly in the season 13 episode Quagmire's Mom. Kira is a girl that Glenn meets at Peter's party, who he almost immediately takes home to sleep with when Lois arrives. It turns out that Kira was only 17, meaning she was underage, despite saying that she was 23. This leads to Quagmire getting arrested, although he still sends pictures of the deeds to Joe and his friends, which is a whole other crime in of itself. He was even sentenced as guilty and would have gone to prison if not for his mother. Stealing our silver medal of disturbing is Quagmire and Joan. Joan first appears in the season 4 episode, I Take Thee, Quagmire. Peter wins Wheel of Fortune and Joan is the maid he got from the show. She meets Quagmire and the two fall in love. This is one of the few times where Quagmire seems to actively love someone instead of being the personification of our lust medal. Not too long after he proposes to Joan and the two get legally married, and while they seem happy at first, Glenn very quickly falls back into his lustful ways and tries to divorce her, which leads to her threatening to murder Quagmire and then kill herself. Quagmire then tries to fake his death multiple times and only stops when Joan accidentally kills herself by touching Death's arm. Disturbingly, he then asks Death to leave the body behind for 5 minutes, supposedly for him to do things with. So this relationship is pretty much on another level as far as being screwed up. Finally grabbing the gold medal of disturbing relationships is Quagmire and Sonia. In the season 12 episode, Quagmire's Quagmire, we're introduced to Sonia. Glenn meets Sonia when he goes to return a laptop that has stopped functioning. It turns out that she is just as lustful as he is. The two initially hit it off due to being so similar, but it very quickly goes south after this. Sonia drugs him to make sure she can sleep with him on their first night, and Glenn initially thinks he's in love with her because of this. Sonia slowly becomes worse and worse though, humiliating him at every turn and even kidnapping him. She even attempts to shoot Joe when they try to save Quagmire. As the episode's title implies, Sonia ends up being just as disturbing as Quagmire himself, which says a lot about him. But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge more of our videos, but most importantly, stay wicked.